Electric vehicles are literally the biggest scam in late-day modern automotive history. From vehicles that you can't work on yourself, you have to and very reliant on the dealer, limited charging infrastructure, high cost of replacement batteries that can tune you over $20,000, $30,000 at the 8 to 10 year mark, and depreciation that's enough to choke a horse are all strong reasons why people are starting to catch on to the fact that electric vehicles are not necessarily the answer for the future. We talk about $1.2 trillion used car industry as well is starting to take a hit. People are starting to quickly realize that the used car segment is largely more popular by buying internal combustion vehicles rather than EVs, which are taking a big slide and a big hit. Buying a brand new EV is bad enough from a cost perspective. Teslas don't come cheap, for example. And a lot of their competitors from Porsche, Mercedes, Audi are all luxury brands who are developing the technologies, but they are luxury brands. They cost a ton of money. So some people believe that get a used electric vehicle is the answer. No, that's not the answer either. People are not buying used electric vehicles. It's driving down aggressively. People don't want them. Even on the used car market, dealers are literally trying to isolate themselves from selling used vehicles that have electrification technology. Why aren't people buying used EVs? Well, the simple fact is you don't get the subsidies on the used market like they did when they were brand new. You also don't necessarily have the latest technology for buying a 5-year-old electric vehicle. Every year goes by, drastic improvements in the marketplace are coming. Charging infrastructure is not there yet either, and just the sheer cost of replacing some of the batteries and electric moving parts and the complex technology buried in those vehicles. As these vehicles get older, you're going to start facing yourself with some significant price tags. People just don't want that. They're not interested in it. And so is the market shifting again, where there was a very popular projection that people were literally looking at electrification in their next automobile purchase. There's been some shift in the market and people don't want that anymore. They're not buying new and they're not buying used. It doesn't just end with the consumer like you and I. A lot of people, like the rental companies that were once really fully engaged in filling their fleets with electric vehicles, are now becoming more shy and they're getting rid of them. They're scaling down because the simple fact that when they're done with their electric vehicle, they have to sell it through an auction or get them gone and sell them to the marketplace in the general population, and people aren't buying them. So it's becoming more difficult even for the rental vehicles to discharge those vehicles after a used short period of time. Say, for example, after 2 or 3 years, it's almost impossible to get rid of those vehicles without a significant loss. As well, Volkswagen's Christian Daltheim basically says when a car loses 1% of its worth, I lose 1% profit. And he also openly admits that the loss in value from used vehicles on the EV marketplace translates to profit loss in the organization. Nobody wants that. Another huge issue that we're going to see is in Europe, one of the biggest consumers of electric vehicles today is going to see some big hits, because in 2021, when the automotive industry was at its peak, it literally sold as many vehicles you could possibly dream of. And of course, the transition plans, because a lot of countries, for example, in Europe, even Canada, for example, are putting targets like 2035. There was a really strong aggression and push to decarbonize the environment and the atmosphere by 2035. And with that said, 2021 represented the year of a strong, aggressive push. But did you know 3-year leases are where a lot of those kicked in? So you would anticipate within another year or so, you're going to have a massive flood of used electric vehicles on the market, which absolutely exacerbate the problem that we're seeing today. Nobody wants a used electric vehicle. And Matt Harrison, Toyota's COO, has actually openly admitted there is no used car EV demand. Now, while some of these companies are offering EVs as great opportunities for startup ride-sharing businesses, the fact remains is there's a very limited number of those. We also can't think about countries that are developing nations. For example, Africa, there's a huge opportunity to sell used vehicles in that marketplace, but they can't have them. They don't want them. They want good old-fashioned internal combustion engines because they don't have the charging infrastructure and likely never will. So EVs have no place even in Africa. Even China is openly admitting that while they're one of the leaders in terms of innovation in the electrification marketplace, are starting to see the fallout. Tons of electric vehicles falling by the wayside, getting parked in an old ditch, grass, trees growing through them, simply because once they wear out, they're done. A lot of people are deciding they're not worth putting even new sets of batteries in. It's better just to scrap them. And what they're finding is tons of these EVs just getting abandoned, left out to pasture to die. And what does that mean? That means we're filling the planet with garbage. So are you starting to doubt me yet that EVs are starting to lose ground in the current marketplace? Well, then how do you answer this question? Tesla earlier this year started incrementally increasing the cuts to their base MSRP price tags for a lot of their brand new Teslas. Why all of a sudden are you losing 5, 10, or knocking 15% off of the price of a lot of their EVs? The Model S, the Model X, we're seeing some huge slashes in their base prices for buying brand new. Huge incentives for customers to buy their brand new vehicles. Once they're used, Tesla doesn't care. They've made their money on the front end with the sale of that new vehicle, and they've allowed that vehicle to hit the marketplace. So huge incentives, and clearly they're trying to chase after the market and trying to be the leading innovators. But sadly, even with those aggressive incentives that Tesla was offering up, people have started to change their mind. Sure, while some of them are looking at some of the other options, I mean, we look at Ford. Ford's a classic example. They're Lightning. They're slicing their output half for the F-150 Lightnings. Nobody wants them. The Mustang Mach-E's are not selling very well either, and they're having to rescale. Ford's even admitted that they're halting the creation of their battery plant manufacturing facility that they were going to build. We also know GM was looking at that as well, and a lot of these manufacturers are literally slowing down the idea of continuing on and developing that technology. They're hitting the brakes, so to speak. And what sort of numbers are we actually looking at here? Clearly, the fact that they're not selling in the used car market translates to dollars. Well, the average used vehicle on the secondhand market today is selling for about 5% less in this last couple of months. Well, Tesla's gone down by about a third. So in other words, used electric vehicles are clearly harder to sell, and they're walking off the lots at a much bigger discount for the consumer. Sure, it could represent a great buy for somebody that really wants to get into that market, but again, a cautionary note that the older that vehicle is, the closer you are to the end of that ticking time bomb where you actually have to put in a new set of batteries. 10 to 12 years. And market trends are now showing the increasing number of used electric vehicles exceeding 90 days on the car lots shows that these types of vehicles are becoming a risky inventory, and a lot of car dealers are just shying away from them. They don't even want to touch them. They're saying, keep that away, or we'll take it off your hands for pennies on the dollar. They don't want to take on the risk because it is a risk. There's other reasons, for example, why a lot of these electric vehicles aren't selling on the used car market very well. I mean, with a conventional ICE type vehicle, internal combustion, everybody sort of knows the trends. These vehicles have been around for decades. And so it's pretty easy to put a tag to a vehicle. It's easy to say, hey, this is a 5-year-old BMW with 80,000 kilometers on it. You're probably going to get another 100,000 miles out of it. And they extrapolate and say it's probably worth between a range like this, depending on the condition. They have a small finite range to work within. But with the EV marketplace, it's much harder to judge and analyze how much battery life is left. A lot more of it off the hip, so to speak. Did you realize 30% of an EV's value goes directly into the batteries? So if you know that a set of batteries are pretty much close to the end, that's pretty much a third or almost close to a half of the value of that vehicle alone. So if you're finding yourself with a $30,000 set of batteries to swap out, you're probably at a place where you're making a hard decision whether it's even worth it, especially if the vehicle's up there in that 7-8 years of age range. The vehicle could easily wipe itself off and you may just send it to scrap. And sure, while there's some experts in the field that think that, there are still a bit of a cult following looking for those used electric vehicles. Specifically, Tesla has its own little following. Those cult groups that just love the simplicity, the leading edge technology, and the fact that they were the pioneers makes them an easier bet. But still, there's that whole cost value proposition when you're talking about your replacement batteries. Even the BMW i3 still represents now as a little bit of a cult following. It's one of those nuanced vehicles BMW has. You're able to drive the brand. It's an interesting little runabout vehicle, easy to park, easy to drive, easy to own. But yet, there's still a small niche amount of people that want those. Outside of a couple of those specific niche models, for the most part, electric vehicles on the used market are not selling. Another big reason a lot of them aren't selling on the used or the new market is simply the cost. We already said a lot of the leading innovators of this are premium brand makers, Mercedes, BMW, Audi. Now, even, sure, you've got brands, for example, like Hyundai and Kia, but where you once had a car, a small SUV that was an internal combustion engine is only worth 30 grand, now its equivalent EV version might be closer to $60,000. People just don't see the value. They don't understand that, hey, this is worth our time and money because all of the other factors going against it. We just don't want it. We just can't bring ourselves to spending that kind of money for that type of vehicle? It just doesn't make sense. The Bolt EUV as well versus the Chevy Trax. I can buy myself a $15,000 Trax, or I can spend myself a $35,000 EV, which is essentially the same chassis and vehicle, minus one's ICE, one's electric. Most people just don't want that. They're not interested in that. So as a result, a lot of these leading innovators and the electric car segments are starting to say, we need something that's more cost effective. We need to bring something to the table that has the best technology, but it's affordable for more masses. Sure, it was great to showcase some of their Halo cars, but bringing some more affordable vehicles to the table are clearly what a lot of electric vehicle manufacturers are starting to believe is the answer. But is that the answer? I'm not so sure that's the answer. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people believing owning electric vehicles will reduce your ability for freedoms. It'll reduce your capacity for long drives. It'll keep you closer to home. That whole idea of centralization and the whole idea of removing freedoms and rights are clearly dialed into some of the conspiracy theories out there. And as we move along, the fact is you start loading up everybody with electric vehicles, the capacity in the system just is not quite there. And that combined with the fact that there's the uncertainty of the complexity in the technology, the battery replacements, it leads the sheep, the people, to a place where they just feel like maybe leasing is the safest way. So they're not tied to long-term maintenance repair costs. They just want to get in a vehicle, drive it, relatively low cost of maintenance and servicing, and what they deem as a free opportunity really isn't free after all. But leasing might be the actual switch. More people might be leaning going that route and never really own anything. And for those conspiracy theorists out there, that clearly is the beginning of the end. So for many people out there who just believe that I own a vehicle, I fix my own vehicle, and I don't want to be governed by some upper force telling me I can't drive my vehicle, is a big significant reason why people are not buying these electric vehicles. Because as a matter of fact, there's a really strong belief out there that EVs are a booster to the transition of ownership to usership. I really hope that helps everyone. Give it some thought. But yes, in fact, the market is shifting a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Please do subscribe to the channel. Give that a good smack right there. It'd be great to have you come back again and again. Don't forget, right there is a great video. You probably want to check it out as to what's going on. Jeep, Dodge, Ram, Stellantis in general. It's a painful time. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.